You want us to stand up for a second? Everybody on the table are families, and we're waiting for another family.
Well, we do, but I don't, these guys are probably not a problem with that. It's just that we don't get to see the family members. Are you? Yeah. What do you guys, what do you think?
רוצה את זה?
Yeah, okay, so. It would be better, but.
יש לה התיק שלי שם.
Are we waiting for the... We're going to start in a sec. We're going to wait for the last family to come in.
לא, אני מלכתחילה, לא. זה אומר שגם לך אסור, אבל...
אז אתה חזרת לארץ עכשיו, ואת כאילו פה? איפה את מגרת?
אני בחולון גרה.
אנחנו גרים בנתניה.
בן שלך בגולני? שריונר?
חטפו חזק.
תפס קו כאילו. כן. בצפוני?
לא, היו בגזרה המרכזית.
Sorry, just one more family is joining us as we speak, so we'll start as we're going. Thank you to everyone for coming. I'm not going to speak. Israel's at war, and we've gathered 4 brave families and loved ones who have loved ones that they've been missing since the Hamas invasion on Saturday. There are 4 families that are Israeli-American, and they've asked to speak to you. We're joined by family members of Hirsch Goldberg, Poland, Adrienne Netta, Yonatan, Jonathan Dekelchain, and Itai Chain. So I'll ask Hirsch's parents to begin.
My name is Rachel Goldberg. I'm Hirsch's mom. I guess should I start with what happened starting Saturday morning? I was upstairs in my house in Jerusalem. I knew that Hirsch and a friend of his were sleeping out, camping somewhere. I didn't know exactly where. The first sirens, the bomb sirens, went off in Jerusalem, so I ran down the stairs to wake my 2 daughters so we could get into the bomb shelter in Jerusalem. When we got out 10 minutes later with the all clear, I normally don't use my phone on the Jewish Sabbath, but it was an emergency and I needed to know where my son was. So I turned my phone on, I believe at 8:23 in the morning. And when I turned it on, there were 2 texts in a row from Hirsch at 8:11. The first one said, "I love you." And immediately at 8:11 also it said, "I'm sorry." And so I knew immediately wherever he was, it was a terrible situation. I took it to mean, I love you and I'm sorry because whatever is going to happen is going to cause you tremendous pain and worry. Since that time, I of course tried calling him right back. There was no answer. I texted him a couple times, "Are you okay?" I've not heard from him since the text I received at 8:11 on Saturday morning. We've since found out from putting together eyewitnesses from a picture from inside of a bomb shelter that we saw. We tried to put together who was in that bomb shelter with him. We've spoken to eyewitnesses. We know that he was injured in a gun battle. I mean, they were all civilians at a music festival. They were fish in a barrel, sitting in this bomb shelter. Terrorists came to the door. They were throwing grenades in, shooting machine guns. And we know that Hirsch's arm from the elbow down was severed, was blown off, and that he tied a tourniquet around with his shirt. And Hamas came in after the gunfire settled down and said, "Anyone who can walk, stand up and walk out." We are told that he was completely calm. I think he was probably in shock. And he got up and he walked out with 5 other people, young people from the music festival, 2 young women, 3 other young men. They were put on a pickup truck and driven away by Hamas. Then the police told us one thing they knew is that the last known signal, cell signal from his phone was on the border with Gaza.
So not much to add. Hirsch was at the festival with one of his best friends, On-Air Shapira. By eyewitness accounts from the people that we talked to who were in this bomb shelter, several people, independent of each other, said, "Your son and his friend On-Air saved our lives, anybody who's alive, because as grenades were being thrown in, they were tossing them back out. They were trying to comfort people." And so I just thought I would add that.
Maybe you could add just the origin of the family in the United States?
Sure. I'll just say that Rachel and I both grew up in Chicago. We were living in California in 2000 when Hirsch was born. We made Aliyah to Israel as a family in the summer of 2008 when Hirsch, who's our oldest child, he was 7.5, almost 8 when we moved to Israel in the summer of 2008. We've been living in Jerusalem ever since. We have 2 daughters, 20 and 17, and I just want to take 1 minute to talk a little bit about Hirsch. He is a smiley, fun-loving guy, and people of all ages just gravitate towards him. And if you mention his name to his friends, his teachers, my friends, our friends, you mention his name and people just smile because he's the kind of guy who's just fun to be around and makes people feel good and have a good time. He's got a few passions, one of which is traveling the world, and he's been saving his money to go on his big trip at the end of December.
Hi, thank you everybody for coming. My name is Neta. I'm the eldest son for Adrian Neta. As this tragedy was unfolded on Saturday morning, me and my other siblings were talking to my mom on the phone, trying to calm her down. Things were sort of calm when she heard a lot of gunfire outside of her shelter, and we tried to calm her down. That's when I dropped off the call. And both my brother and my sister were on the call with her as the terrorist barged into her home. And we heard a little bit of screaming, and that was our last contact with her. There was no shooting on the call, and the neighbors downstairs also didn't hear any shooting. My mom used the little bit of Arabic that she picked up working as a nurse in the hospital in Soroka for 20 years to calm down the terrorists. And it is our hope, which is a little bit ridiculous at this stage to say that the optimistic scenario here is that she's held hostage in Gaza and not dead on the street of the kibbutz where we grew up. My mom is a 66-year-old lady, proud mother of me and my 3 other siblings who are in the room with me, along with 7 grandkids. She was sitting on the porch of our home in Be'eri on Saturday morning when this ferocious attack happened. My mom devoted her life to helping other people of all races and genders in her practice as a nurse in the hospital in the Negev in Be'er Sheva. She installed this passion for people in us, her kids, and her grandkids. As I said, our last contact with my mom was Saturday morning around 9:45 a.m. as the terrorists burst into her shelter in her home in Be'eri. There are a lot of images kind of spreading around, which I don't feel the need to talk about. I wanna bring forward the responsibility that the Israeli government has to bring back all the hostages that are kept in hostage by the Hamas terrorists. While saying this, I want also to speak about the responsibility that the US administration, President Biden, and the Secretary of State Blinken has for the lives of every US citizen that is out there. And they are responsible to bring the US citizens back home safe and sound. We expect nothing less from the US administration and from President Biden and Secretary of State Blinken. I speak in the name of myself and my family, and I wish for the quick solution for this terrible, terrible situation that all of us are in. We never imagined that this is how it will look. Thank you again for coming.
I'm just gonna read out. My name is Ayana Neta. I'm the youngest of my mother's children. My mother, Adrian, is missing and was probably taken by Hamas terrorists to the Gaza Strip. My mother is an exceptional human being. She spent most of her adult life as a nurse in the community and then as a midwife in a hospital. When she walked into a delivery room, she saw a human being in front of her. Not a religion, not a race, not a hijab, not an Orthodox Jew. Always the human being she saw. We once calculated that my mother has brought in thousands of lives into this world. When Hamas walked into my mother's room in Be'eri, they saw her there alone, but they did not see a human being.
Again, thank you for coming. My name is Ruby Chen. On behalf of Itai Chen, before starting, just wanting to ask all of you here, and thank you for coming, and all of those listening to us, please do not think of us only as a headline. We're more than that. I'm here with my family, my two sisters. We grew up in New York City. We like to say we are the proud outcome of the New York public education system. Still have family out in New Jersey, Long Island. And I'd like to talk about family before talking about Itai. Out of some twist of fate, we became family. In addition to us, we've identified about 10 other families like us that have a US citizen missing. Okay? This family and my family is now missing. We have a missing person of our family. Within my family, I have, in addition to Itai, 2 sons. One of them, the youngest, Alon, is actually celebrating his bar mitzvah this weekend. The bar mitzvah, for those of you who do not know, is the ceremony where a young Jewish man becomes a man. And Itai, in order to be home this weekend, elected to be at his base previous weekend in order for us to celebrate the bar mitzvah as a whole, the whole family. We still hope that that celebration with my sisters and my family will happen in the near future. And I'm sure my friends here as well, or my new family, have additional, events happening that they also wish to have that wholeness of these events. So please, think of us not just as that headline, but we're people with families, and we want to be back families again. Itai, my son, joined the army about a year ago. He's in the armed corps. He was serving on the border of Gaza. The last time that we heard from him was Saturday morning, where he said that they were under attack. We know that he was active, that he was in communication for a while, but since then, silence. The formal indication that we received from the IDF is that he is defined as missing in action. What does that mean? It means that nobody since Saturday morning has been able to physically locate him, identify him, and say that he saw him. It also means that he's not in the hospital. It also means that he's not on the deceased list that has been identified. You would think it would be a good assumption to say that after 70 hours, if he's not in the state of Israel, he might be some other place. And if that is the case, then he is by definition a POW, US citizen, and Israeli citizen. And what we are asking for his captives and for the US government as well to ask from the captives Hamas is to treat him as a POW should be treated according to international law, meaning having someone visit him, have a doctor see him, have a UN Red Cross representative see him as well. And as said before, we want to be back, we want to go back to become family. We want this to end as soon as possible. Hopefully with your help, the people here will help us amplify this message to the US government, Secretary of State, that until now have been saying all of the right things, but we do, at least I, on behalf of my family, am asking the US not to take a backseat. The US has a lot of resources at its attention. It is able to do many things that can be different than what the Israeli government could do. And we are asking on behalf of my family for President Biden, where we are sure his heart is in the right place when it comes to Israel, and Secretary of State to do what they can to make this end for us as soon as possible to become family, whole again.
Thank you all for coming this afternoon. My name is Jonathan Dekel-Chen. I'm a lifetime member of kibbutzim on the border since 1990 on Kibbutz Nir Oz. Kibbutz Nir Oz was attacked in the early morning of this Saturday. I have children and grandchildren who live there with me. Kibbutz Nir Oz is no more. It was destroyed in a barbaric, inhuman attack in which dozens of my friends, my neighbors, were killed. Many dozens more are either known to be hostages or missing. I'm here speaking today, reaching out to my son Sagi, who grew up on the kibbutz, Sagi Dekel-Chen. He's an arm length away in Gaza, evidently, but couldn't be farther from me and our family right now. I grew up in Connecticut, as you can probably hear from the accent, but I've never felt farther away from there either. Sagi is the father, as you can see, 35 years old, the father of two beautiful daughters, and his wife is now pregnant with their third daughter. Sagi is exactly the kind of son that every father would want to have. A leader, a friend, a loving man. He and many other such young men on the kibbutz are now missing after having tried to repulse the attack by evidently hundreds of Hamas terrorists and looters. Many died in the process. Sagi was not found, and we have heard or seen no trace of him since then. The survivors of the kibbutz, on the kibbutz, we were a community of 400. At the moment, we know of 160 survivors. The rest have either died or are, as we said, prisoners or missing. The survivors call this a pogrom, what happened to us. It's not a war. It's not a fair fight. It is a pogrom. Hundreds of heavily armed, well-organized terrorists walked, rode, ran over the border with one object in mind, and that is to kill, maim, and destroy civilian life along the border. As such, it seems to me that the United States, my original home, and still a very beloved place for me, always wants to be and must be on the side of good. Hamas is evil. It's difficult for me to say. I'm what is called a peacenik in Israel, as many of the kibbutz members are in our area. But what we've witnessed, this kind of savagery, this kind of inhumanity, must be stopped. And as a result, like the other 5 people on this stage who would prefer to be anywhere but here right now, do appeal to the United States government, to the Congress, to do what they can on the side of good here. We're waiting for Sagi to come home. We do not know what fate he met, along, as I said, with dozens of other people from the kibbutz. And just so you understand, these aren't all 35-year-old men. These are children. These are aged people, and everything in between. So if there ever was a moment of good against evil, in the harshest terms, this is it. And I thank you for listening to us. And I'm sure all of us will welcome questions. We'll answer as we can, both for our children and relatives and for those well over 100 hostages that were taken. Among the hostages, I'll add that outside of Sagi, there are 3 other hostages taken from my kibbutz who are American citizens, Israeli Americans, and 2 who were murdered on Saturday morning.
Thank you very much to all the families participating. We're going to go now to questions from the journalists. We're going to start with Becky Anderson from CNN. We're going to go one by one. Please, when you get the microphone, say your name and the outlet that you're from. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for doing this today. Israel has said that it will do its best to get any hostages home, but there's also talk of an imminent ground incursion at this point. Just how concerned are you? This isn't to any single person. I don't know who wants to take that.
Yeah, I can address the question. As we saw some of the kinds of these questions coming up, right? I don't have earlier acquaintance with anybody at the table, but I would assume that none of us are military personnel or foreign affairs strategic thinkers. We are the family members of US citizens that were kidnapped into the Gaza Strip. Hence, I do not think that it is our place to comment on the necessary actions that the Israeli government has to take, or the US Biden administration for that sake. All we ask from the Biden administration and the Secretary of State, Blinken, is to act to the immediate release of all hostages, and remember that the US government has direct responsibility to the lives of the US citizens that are held hostage by these terrorists. So whatever any government needs to do in order to make that happen, please make that happen.
Hello, Lester Holt from NBC News in the United States. Have any of you been contacted directly by the U.S. administration or the Israeli administration in terms of what a pathway toward negotiations might look like? Thank you.
So what I could say is that the side of the U.S. Embassy, we've been in contact with the State Department and the U.S. Embassy that have taken note of the details of Itai, but there's been no formal or concentrated attempt to talk to us as a group and updating us about what they are doing in this matter. I think it is a legit request from a representative from the State Department to sit with us, update us what they have been doing and what they are planning to do, and able to support us. From the Israeli government, as I said before, well, we got a indication about the status of Itai as defined as missing in action, and waiting to get additional updates. By the way, is there someone here from the U.S. Embassy? No one here?
Excuse me, what have you been hearing so far from Israeli officials?
Can you identify yourself?
Yoav Borovich from Kan 11 in Israel. So I wanted to know, please, what have you heard so far from officials, from Israeli officials? How much information are you getting? And what's your expectation of Israel regarding the situation?
I can speak, I think, both specifically and more broadly. Most of the good things that have happened so far in response at the civilian level, at the civil level, including work around, efforts around hostages and the missing, have been ground up, from the ground up. Groups of citizens coming together to both aid people that live in communities like mine, and also to try to make some sense in this fog of war as to what's happened. I know what you're talking about. So far, there's been little to no contact.
Excuse me for interrupting. I am an American citizen, and I've been living in the U.S. for the last 5 years. As I said before, my mom was born and raised in California, but I was born and raised in a kibbutz, in Kibbutz Be'eri. I do not have American education, so I am natural Israel blunt. And I want to be blunt when answering this question and say zero communication from the Israeli government, zero communication on our side. I do have friends that are currently engaging in the combat around my home, around Kibbutz Be'eri, and I can appreciate the total mayhem and mess that the combat environment is creating. But I think that after 3 days, more than 3 days now, it is more than a reasonable request to have somebody from the Israeli government or the US administration approach us with any type of information that they may have on our family members.
At least a plan of what they intend to do.
Okay, thank you very much to all of the families who were here today. Thank you to everybody for coming. We have two gentlemen in the back who help coordinate individual interviews for any journalists who want to speak directly and specifically with some of the families. And we should all hope and wish for better days. Thank you.